Esther with Discover Your Origins, and in this video I'm going to share some research tips on how to deal with name variations and how they appear in the records. And I have an interesting case study here to share with you. And I want to introduce you to Dionitia M Speaks. So let's go over to her family search page. She is the daughter of John Lawson Speaks and Missouri Olive Culture. She lived between 1848 and 1920. And when I first ran across Dionitia, looking at her date range, she should appear in multiple censuses from 1850 to 1920. And when I would do just a general search for her, nothing would show up, or very little. I was able to find her in the censuses with her father up until 1870. And that was because I could search for John Lawson Speaks. But I couldn't find her after that. She should have been in the 1880 census. And so on Family Search, she was already linked to her husband, Leonidas Lafayette Asbury Hysaw. And he has an unusual name too. And generally speaking, when you find an unusual name in a family grouping like this, you want to start searching the person with the unusual name because it just stands out in the record. And in this case, she wasn't. And so I also had trouble finding Leonidas Lafayette Asbury Hysaw on records doing census searches. And so I had to expand my search and start working with the children. And you can see that the children also had multiple unusual names. You have Marana Olive Eugenia Hysaw and Finis Jessie Hysaw, Eula Leona Lafayette. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start with Finis Jessie Hysaw. So let's look at him. So here are his sources, and you can see that there were some transcription errors on his name, but they seem to be a little bit closer to what his actual name is. And here we can look at the 1900 census, and even though there's a transcription error, you can see that there's Finis, and he's in the household of Dionitia, his mother. So if we look at it a little bit closer, we can see that this was most likely a transcription error for the way it shows up in the index. But looking at the image itself, we should be able to see more clearly the names. So let's zoom in here. Okay. So it is Hysaw, H-I-S-A-W. That sometimes could be confused with an N, but that is a W. And then Dionitia, D-I-O-N-I-T-I-A. And then here's her children. So Dionitia is a widow at this time, so that's why I couldn't find her with her husband. And there's her other children. And I'll talk about them more in a minute here. So the way I found Dionitia in the 1900 census was by searching for Finis. So let's go back. And I won't go through each source record that I used to find Dionitia, but just realize that one research strategy is using the family group and searching for each member of the family to find the person that you're looking for. So let's go back and look at Dionitia's source records. Okay, so you can see that in each of these records, her name is recorded differently. We have Dionitia with an S, then she's just D Speaks, then Dionita, or Dionita in 1870, and then Miss D.M.O. Speaks in her marriage record with her husband Lafayette Hysaw. In 1880, it's a Dincy. In 1900, it's transcribed as Dionite, although we saw that it was actually Dionitia with a T-I-A. In 1910, she's recorded as Mrs. Missouri O. Hysaw. And then the 1920 census is just doesn't make any sense. So you would never be able to find her with this spelling because it doesn't make any sense. So let's look at that a little bit closer. So the way that I found this record was just continuing to look for all the census records of her children. And she's here with her son, and she's right below her son. Her son is John L. Hysaw, and here she is. And I think that is a Dionici, hard to say, S. So just the handwriting itself made it very difficult, and you could interpret that to be an I. But the way that I was able to link her or find this record is by looking for her children. So here's John, her daughter Jenny, Bertha, May, and Leona. So it was a good match, and everything else on this record matched. So I was able to then finally connect this last census record that she should have appeared in, even though the name spelling was so unusual. So I wrote a blog article kind of explaining things to be aware of when you're searching for records and name variations, because names are going to be recorded differently on different records depending on who's doing the recording and what they hear. And spelling was not something that was really standardized when these records were created. So here's all the different name variations that I found for Dionitia. Missouri O, the reason that I figured that that was right is because her mother's name is Missouri Olive. And so it would make sense that she might be known as Mrs. Missouri Olive Hysaw. And so on Family Search, we've recorded all of these different name variations with the exception of the one that was transcribed incorrectly. There were some additional examples from this family group. The daughter, Mariana Olive Eugenia Hysaw, also had several name variations that made it difficult to find all the records for her. So if we look at her a little bit closer, we'll go to her sources here. She had Olive with an F, Eugenia, Ginny with a J, Ginny with a G, and Eugenia. And so she was a little bit tricky to find all of the records that she appeared in as well. So I have some other suggestions in this article. So I was dealing here mostly with first name variations. You can also have last name variations. The Stewart family is one that I've talked about previously, and Stewart can be spelled Stewart. And it also can be spelled Stuart. And if you look in the records, they are spelled both ways. Van Pelt, which is another allied family, is recorded with Van Pelt and also as Pelt. The descendants of John Hugh Pelt went by either Van Pelt or Pelt, and so you have to search both ways in order to find them in the records. Family Search uses a tool behind the scenes called SoundX. So that means that when you do a search, it's going to pull up variations based on the way things sound, not necessarily the way things are spelled. And so that's helpful to help return records. Some other tips that I suggest is, try searching for records in competing databases. So look on Family Search, Ancestry, MyHeritage, and just the way the different indexes were made may pull up the record that you're looking for. Also try doing middle name searches. So for example, Leonidas Lafayette Asbury Hysaw. You could look for him as any of these combinations and see if you can find the records. Try doing a search with just a first name or a last name. So like you wouldn't necessarily be able to find Dionitia and Dincy but you might be able to find Hysaw. And so if you know the location, then try just a last name search and see if you can find anybody with the last name of Hysaw in the locality that you're looking for, and you may find your family. Finally, when you're doing searches, you may try using wildcards. And on Family Search, and I think this also works on Ancestry, is using a question mark or an asterisk. So here's an example with a question mark. A question mark will replace one character. So Hunsaker could be spelled with a Z or an S. So this would pull up variations that may exist in that space where the question mark is. Or if you're really not sure, because Hunsaker could be spelled with an E-K-E-R or an A-K-E-R, a Z, an S, and so if you use an asterisk, it replaces multiple characters in that place. And so that is another research strategy. And I give an example here of Amanda Stewart. She was hard to find because she was listed with her grandparents' last name. And well, she was listed with her stepfather's last name under her grandparents. And so you wouldn't necessarily know that that was Amanda Stewart because the last names were recorded differently. And as I mentioned before, research other family members and then search, search, search. Just try as many different variations and spellings as you can. So for more details, be sure to check out this blog article, which is linked in the description box below. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.